Na, 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 na. Hey guys, I am back with another reaction video. This time we are listening to, or we are watching, the tragic tale of Sara, the girl that saved Rudeus. Mushoku Tensei, Sara's backstory explained by AniNews. For everybody who has seen my review of episode 4 of the second season of Mushoku Tensei, the letter of invitation, will know at the end of that video I said I'm going to react to this video by AniNews. Sara's tale, if episode 4 did one thing wrong, it didn't touch on the end of Sara's tale, so to speak. Maybe not the end, like I guess the breaking point after Rudeus leaves. Some stuff did happen with Sara that needed to be mentioned, in my opinion, and I don't really understand why the episode didn't take some time to cover it, you know. But I'm a big fan of AniNews. I subscribe to him on my personal channel. He does a lot of cut content stuff. His main thing is isekai content, but he's one thing that he does after every episode. He does cut content, basically what every anime episode cuts from either the manga or the light novel, and he talks about it. And he's done Danmachi. He's done Overlord. He did ReZero. He's very good at what he does. And I am jealous of what he does, because I can only imagine how much he has to pour through to, like, obviously to get this done every week and make sure that he has all the correct content and all that. And he also he dives even deep, like you see here on the side. He dives deep into how Sophie became Silent Fits, because an anime episode just can't touch all of it, even the finer details. Rudeus and Paul, the reunion from last season, and like I said, Mushoku Tensei is starting to get a lot of love, and I am very, very excited, because it was weird at one point to think, like, yo, am I one of the few people who talked about it when I made that video? And now it's starting to get the love that it deserves. But anyway, enough time wasting. Let's dive right on in, and obviously we will react. This should be a pretty short one, but Sara's tale needs to be mentioned, because like I said, volume 7 is hugely important, and for a bunch of side characters, they're very important in Rudeus' story. Counter Arrow is so important. Soul Dad is so important. Sara in particular is so important. And like I said, she's one of the most tragic characters of this story, because there's a timeline where Sara just gets with Rudeus and they're great together, you know? Or maybe Sara, and I don't know if Sara would have accepted some things that happened later in the story regarding other people, but I think they were pretty good together. And Sara was a better version of Eris. She was more mature. She could talk. Like, even at the end when they at the end, after their breakup, after she slapped him, you remember right before that happened, Sara was making the effort to go talk to Rudy. Eris wouldn't have done that. Eris would just beat his ass. That's what she would have done. So it's like Sara was just a better version of Eris. And I'm always gonna be like, and I know, like I mentioned in the last one, she's like an unofficial part of Rudy's harem, you know. And it just sucks that she doesn't. Maybe one of the few times since I started watching anime that I wish, like, that the harem could be increased. I hate harems, I really do, and I think sometimes, depending on who's writing the stories, I think they're very lazy. But oh, let's dive right in. I'm getting sad just thinking about it.
As an orphan born to a simple hunter and his common folk wife, the only thing Sara received from them was her name, her first name. Since neither were of noble birth, they weren't so fortunate as to be able to offer anything more, especially not a last name, since those were most often a privilege only nobility possessed.
I love that fact. Like, you get even these little things, man. Like, the world of Mushoku Tensei is so it's great. It's a tough world. It's a tragic world. But I don't think it's as dark as ReZero, but man, it can get dark when it needs to be. And Sara is just one of those countless stories where, God, she's such a good person, you know? Ah, God damn it.
Didn't really matter though, since for the first 10 years of her life, Sara was happy. In a small village right at the heart of Asura, close to the western edge of the Millbots region, Sara had grown up helping her parents. It was one fateful day when she was 10 years old, though, that a massive horde of monsters would attack and take them away from her. They had lost their lives to an issue the Liege Lord of...
So there is a manga basically on volume 7 where you kind of see a little bit of Sarah's backstory, because the actual manga itself, like the main manga, just kind of skips volume 7 altogether, which is a shame. So I'm glad the volume 7 is getting the full manga treatment. And if you listen to most people, the manga for Mushoku Tensei is really bad. I mean, I can't really tell the difference. I just think it accomplishes what it does. I've seen better manga out there, obviously, but no, people don't like the manga. At least if you listen to the Mushoku Tensei subreddit.
Her region should have handled. But rather than that lord send his knights and assist immediately, it was instead parties of adventurers that would show up a whole lot later. One of which consisted of Suzanne and Timothy.
The fucking goat. The goat. Suzanne is the fucking goat. Her design, flawless. Her hair. Bro, her whole drip is fantastic. Bruh, whoever designed her character, oh my god. Give that person a raise, okay? Philip's cool too, but you know, Suzanne's the goat. Suzanne's the goat.
And another with...
Also, she's black, so shout out.
With Mimir and Patrice. They weren't at all acquainted at the time, but when the battle was done and dead accounted for, each pair were the only 2 members remaining from their respective parties.
I would love... That's why... Okay, so this is going to sound bad. Okay. I know I mentioned it before about Volume 7 being a movie, okay? And I remember somebody in the comments of my last video said that that's a really risky proposition, especially since I'm like... And I thought, you don't think Mugen Train... I thought about it some more. You don't think Mugen Train was a risky proposition for Demon Slayer? Because obviously if Studio Bind does it right, because we don't know how the movie would come out, but I think with the way they're crafting Mushoku Tensei, I think they would have given, what do you call it? I think they would have given the Volume 7 movie, so to speak, its just desserts. Like, it would have been great. I think it would have been great, man. That's why I'm saying I still look the version of Volume 7 that we got in the anime was good. But I think it would have been a lot better if we got the movie, and then the second season would have just been Rudy after leaving Sara, and we basically would still kind of been at the same point. And then you could have just cut it into a freaking season like they did with the Mugen Train arc. Oh man, that's what I'm saying. I think a movie would have done great for Volume 7 instead of it getting 4 episodes. Because I think they understood the fact that the volume needed to be in the anime, but I just don't think they gave it the love it deserved.
It was a hard-fought clash in which those who survived joined to create their own party together, resulting in the formation of Counter Arrow. Now, back then they were only a D-rank party, but with Sara's help and the constant in and out of other members, it was only a matter of time until they reached the B rank.
Shout out.
After which we know there weren't too
Shout
many quests remaining for them. At least not here in the Asura region. So, with no choice but to go somewhere else, the party decided that heading up north was best, bringing us to Sara's fateful meeting with that depressed magician. When she first heard that he was a Grey Rat, her initial thoughts went straight to the noble who'd ruled over her.
Also, this is the noble, you met him before. He's the guy that was glazing up Ariel in episode 0, the Silent Fits. He was the lord of Sara's territory, and he fucking sucks. He straight sucks, but I'm pretty sure AniNews is going to go into him.
Her village. The Notos Grey Rat that controlled the entirety of the Millbots region,
he's the one that wanted to, like,
protect
marry
its people when they needed.
He's the one that wanted to marry Eris,
without Rudy having even done anything yet, right from the get-go, his name was associated with the very person who'd caused the death of her parents.
Fuck that dude, right there.
His face even resembled that of the crafty-looking noble who'd once come to visit almost a decade ago. That said, it wasn't only the fact he was a Grey Rat that made her dislike him, since the last name itself was actually quite common. No, it was more so the fact that he even possessed a last name. Since that was a clear indication of noble upbringing, to her this Rudeus Grey Rat was obviously a rich kid. He was this stuck-up noble who'd gotten fed up with his life of riches, then decided to leave it all in hopes of playing the adventurer. His robe and messy hair may have been an attempt to hide that, but the expensive staff he carried dictated otherwise.
Hey. Do not talk bad on Eris's family, okay? They got him that staff, okay? Also, rest in peace to, like, Eris's parents, grandfather, all the maids. if I remember correctly, I think the Eris's mom and dad get teleported together, but they get immediately killed by like beasts where they get teleported. And then Eris's grandfather, because I think he was kind of powerful, and so some rival nobles basically got convinced the king that Eris's grandfather was to blame for the incident and had him take responsibility, so he gets executed as like a way to atone for his crimes. So that's why Eris is the leader of her house, so to speak, when they go back to the Fatoa region. But yeah, mom hated Rudeus at first, but Rudeus got that good old charm, and she was all about him. She was all about him by the end of their time together.
Not to mention his gloomy look, which practically screamed "I'm running away." It was a common occurrence that Sara was all too familiar with,
so to speak.
One she truly despised all the way down to her very core. She couldn't understand what it was that compelled these kids to want to leave behind their easy ride through life, but it was their half-hearted intent to follow through on doing so that made a mockery out of the very profession of adventuring. I mean, these kids would glorify fighting monsters and exploring labyrinths, but as soon as they were faced with any real danger, more times than not they would always run. They would never truly fight like their life depended on it, because at the end of the day they always had somewhere comfy to go back home to. It was this selfish approach to adventuring that always put the real adventurers in danger. There did exist the few whose talent allowed them to become adventurers for real, but out of the many years Sarah's been adventuring for, she'd never come across anyone who hesitated because
he wanted to make
at most they'd only ever do a couple jobs.
When saving that other,
so it was that disregard for those who had no choice but to adventure, and their ideology that it was all just a game, that made Sara hate those kids who treated it as such. She hated the idea of them dragging real adventurers into situations where they could potentially lose their livelihood. She hated how it was always just this brief experiment for them. So, as she pegged Rudy to be another one of those kids, her already shallow opinion of him went even lower. So much so that when Rudy stated he was looking for his mother, she immediately believed it to be a lie. To her, she felt he was just trying to seem special.
These are the little things that, with Sarah's character, I'll say this for me when it comes to, like, when I say that Sarah's a better version of Eris, like, there's always going to be a part of me that absolutely despises Eris, absolutely does, because I get that she's a tsundere and she can't fucking communicate, but write down 2 fucking complete sentences. How the fuck are you just supposed to be like, hey, we're not a match, bye? Basically, that's what her wrote said, and obviously she doesn't know about the mental capacity or the mental weakness that Rudeus has to that, right? For the first, if you really think about it, when Eris and Rudy do the deed, right? For the first time in both of his lives, Rudy opened up to someone completely, and the next fucking day, she's gone. And how else is Rudy supposed to say that, especially regarding the note that she gave him? Like, even Ghislaine was like, just fucking talk to him or write a better note. And then she was like, no, Rudy would have talked me out of it. No, Rudy probably would have went with you. That's what probably he would have done. If you were so dead set on going, he would have just went with you, and he would have trained somewhere. Maybe he would never, because Rudy doesn't have the talent to be a swordsman. I think he's basically like an average swordsman at best. He's average. But Rudy would have went with him. Or maybe he would have convinced to just stay in Fatoa and they would have figured things out. And then obviously Rudy would have left at some point to go rescue his mother, which obviously would have turned out completely different because he never goes to Roanoa, to the Magic Academy. But I can never forgive that about Eris. Never can. Because she really hurt my guy. And obviously writing the story, certain things had to happen to make sure that he was even at a point where once they do meet up again, the story can move forward. But my God, man, she hurt my boy. So that's why I'm like, when I see Sara, she's more mature. Obviously, they're older, but she's more mature. Because anybody read that little spin-off manga about Eris's time in the land of swords, where she goes, she doesn't get any better personality-wise. If anything, she gets kind of worse. There's a reason why they call her the Mad Dog Eris, right? But she's obviously Sarah's more mature. She does have, like anybody, she does have her own prejudices and biases or whatever. So obviously she fucking doesn't like Rudeus in the beginning, and like AniNews said, because of his heritage and his lineage and his last name. But once, you know what? I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna play this then because I'm pretty sure he's gonna get there. Once Sara starts warming up to him, we all saw what happened.
Being the case, when it came time for Rudy to join their party, Sara felt it best to keep his involvement to a minimum. Mainly because if there ever came a time when things looked dire, Sara was certain Rudy would run just like all the other half-hearted adventurers. It was when that time never came with the Lester Grizzlies, though, that Sara started to think that perhaps she underestimated him. She definitely still hated him because he was an aristocrat, but perhaps her initial opinion on him may have been a little bit harsh.
Absolutely.
Publicly, she still believed Rudy was lying about his mother, but deep down she knew everything he said was true. Her first job with him made her certain of it. She didn't like the fact that he'd kept his true powers hidden, but the truth of the matter was that Rudeus had saved them. So, no matter how much she still wanted to call Rudy a fraud, deep in her heart she was fully aware that he wasn't. There was just something about him that she still couldn't tolerate, though. And it was way too humiliating to accept that one of those rich kids she hated had saved her. It was all incredibly frustrating, but the way Sara lived...
Some of the toughest things in life is to be able to let go of your own biases. Like, I think a lot of people say they're wrong, but don't really admit it. That's why always feel like it's so dumb. Maybe, what's the manhwa I'm reading right now? I can't remember exactly, but like, this kid, he was weak. It's kind of like Solo Leveling, but it feels like a lot of manhwa or something. Like, this guy's weak, but he's strong, and then this guy just keeps fucking with him, even though knowing at this point the guy's so much stronger than him that, like, bro, get the F out of here. I don't have time for this. We're just wasting time with you. So I think seeing Sara's tale, man, let's just keep going.
With it was by downplaying the severity of it all. She told herself that because the challenge wasn't that hard for him, the next time he really was in danger, that's when she'd see him run.
Bro,
she was certain that Rudy was still the character she was making him out to be. Fast forward to after their encounter with the Snowdrakes, and once again Rudy had proved her wrong. Combine that with the introduction of a person she hated even more than Rudeus, and her impressions of this supposed rich kid had slightly improved a bit. You see, it was after Soldat had insulted both Timothy and Rudy that Sara was furious because of just how wrong he was. She was surprised to find that she was taking Rudy's side for once. For a kid she thought she was supposed to hate, it came as quite the shock when she found herself thinking about just how bravely he fought for them. It made her think that perhaps she didn't hate him. Of course, that made zero sense at all to her, so Sara believed it was just because she must have hated Soldat more. Since Soldat was clearly the worst of two evils, it was only natural she'd take the side of the lesser. I mean, there was a whole list of things Sara came up with that made...
Bruh. Look at all this shit he's done since, well, the last one's more of a character trait. Right? The last two, actually, yeah, the last three, so to speak, are more character traits, but come on.
Rudy better than him.
It's a perfect confusion of Sara,
right, considering Rudy was born a noble, but out of the months she'd spent getting acquainted with him, Rudy certainly didn't act like one. It was extremely confusing since she'd convinced herself that she was supposed to hate them. They were, after all, the very reason her parents died. And she wasn't just about to forget the overwhelming despair of all that. But unlike the Grey Rat Noble whose duty it was to protect her back then, the Grey Rat Noble here actually protected her now, all without any duty whatsoever. He wasn't even a member of her party. But not only did he not run away when the situation looked tough, he even stayed behind to ensure everyone else was safe. It was an act of bravery that truly resonated with Sara. So much so that when she looked back to find Rudy fighting on his own, she was the first to run back and try and save him. This was yet another shock to Sara, since if she did actually hate him the way that she thought she was supposed to, then she would have had no problem leaving him behind back there. There was a clear shift in her perception that was taking place now. No matter how much she knew she loathed nobility, she just couldn't find herself hating Rudy anymore. And it was her inability to comprehend such a massive change in her core beliefs that once again made her so incredibly frustrated. The way she chose to justify it this time was by saying that she only disliked Rudy now. So while she no longer hates him the way that she thought she did, she definitely didn't like him. A crucial distinction she needed to make in order to help her sleep at night. Fast forward once more to after she was rescued, and that would be the trigger for the two to become a whole lot closer now. The two would share stories from their childhood, and Sara would finally explain why she'd been so cold to him.
Look at Suzanne. Hold on. Look at Suzanne, right? Got that eyebrow up. Philip's like, look, I'm just happy they're happy, right? Suzanne's like, I've been working for this shit for months. This is where I'm trying to get up to. Also, I just realized it's weird that they have the same hair color, but not the same eyes. I love this volume cover. I love it. I fucking love it. I love the visual, not volume cover, the visual for the season. It's so oh god, it's so good.
6 months. Yes, the Grey Rats were the ones responsible for the death of her parents, but Rudeus definitely wasn't one of those Grey Rats. Through hard work and numerous acts of bravery, Rudeus had circumvented her belief that even the children of nobles would grow up to commit the same crimes as their parents. She definitely still hated nobility in general, but Rudy was an exception she'd become quite fond of now. So, what started off as a rich kid she couldn't even stand the sight of, turned into a person that wasn't so bad after the first job, then a respectable adventurer after the second. It was from there that her feelings began to change, and with it the core beliefs that every noble was evil. It didn't matter how much she would try to deny it, because nothing would stop her from realizing that Rudeus was different. And it was after that whole endeavor with the Treant, along with the very fact he'd saved her life, that Sara would finally realize it wasn't hatred at all in her heart. No, the feelings that made her so frustrated night after night was in fact a genuine affection to a person she'd fallen for. As soon as she'd come to that realization, Sara didn't hesitate to go out and act on it. She began to invite him to more and more outings and took those as opportunities to get to know him better.
Oh my god.
Then the more and more they talked, the more she found her affection was growing for him, all the way to the point that she was ready to commit.
This is maybe the most dangerous face right here. The most dangerous face.
The thing is, because she was too embarrassed to tell him her feelings directly, Sara decided she would instead sleep with him first. She would use her life debt as a pretext to bed him, then go and tell him her feelings after.
I wonder what would have happened if she just decided to flip it. She just told him about her feelings, and then, you know, she tried to act on it. It's like the one time, it's one of the times where I'm like, lust is powerful, but this isn't, it's like, I don't think lust is the right word. How am I trying to say this? Basically, her tsundere quality won out in the end. Because if she was just following the path that she set for herself, where they just kept talking, and then eventually she's like, look, man, I like you. And then, you know, they do the deed. But in the end, you know, because of her own insecurities, because if tsunderes are anything, like if there's their one character trait, they're very, is it insecure? Is it insecure the right one? Either way, it don't matter. Sara's insecurities won out in the end, and that's why she took the tsundere path of just fucking, I'm gonna fucking get physical, and then we can talk about our feelings afterwards, when realistically, the main thing to solve every tsundere's problems is just communicate with them. But she chose to not communicate in the end.
When that time came and Rudy's lack of arousal became apparent, though, the whole thing was just a massive slap in the face for her. She was in complete and utter shock by the fact his body wasn't attracted to hers. Had she watched Rudy's reactions a bit more closely, though, then she would have easily noticed that he was in just as much shock as she was. But because this was her first time and she was anxious too, it took all she had to salvage her pride then just get out of there. After which she would spend the entire night crying. Now, this next part is spoilers for what's to come in episode 4, but
unfortunately, it didn't come in episode 4, which is why I'm doing this video, because I'm still surprised they didn't give this next part here that he's going to cover some time in episode 4, because that's a problem. So unless they're going to do like a flashback later on in the season, later on in the story, which is not, I'm sorry, that's not good enough, but yeah, sure.
Of finishing Sara's story to completion, we're just gonna go ahead and talk about it now. So, if you don't want to know what happened after Sara slapped Rudeus, then feel free to click off the video now.
Her fucking dagger.
It was the day after the whole debacle in bed that Sara would compose herself and seek out Rudy.
You see what I mean? She's like, look, okay, I messed up. Let me go talk to him. How many tsunderes fucking do that? How many people in real life fucking do that? Jesus Christ. One of the best tsunderes out there. She's just better than Eris. I'll say that straight up. Sara's better than Eris. Just that she just came at the wrong time.
Heard he'd wandered off with Soldat, which was a more than worrying situation since the two weren't exactly friends or anything. When she found them you-know-where talking about you-know-what, every ounce of affection she still felt for him instantly turned to loathing. She was so overcome by shock and devastation that she was blinded to any clue which suggested this wasn't what she thought it was. Had she been a bit older and a bit more mature, then maybe she would have been able to see that something was off. But because Sara was still this 16-year-old girl...
I think that's the one thing also I should have mentioned earlier. Like, these are kids. Obviously, Rudy's not a kid mentally, but he's still a kid, like, in terms of... maybe not a kid. Like, he's still inexperienced in this. Like... Mushoku Tensei, I'll say this every single time, Mushoku Tensei does nothing without a purpose, right? So yeah, these are kids. Yeah, sure, they're out there fighting, but they're kids out there fighting right now in our world, on Earth right now. They don't know everything, and especially they're just entering into maybe the most hormone-filled time of their life with puberty and all that stuff, and you're thinking about sex, you're thinking about all these things, and of course if something just doesn't work out the way you thought or the way you heard, you're gonna feel some type of way about it. But the fact that Eris was like, okay, I see all that, I'm gonna go talk to him and let's figure this thing out. And obviously she sees Rudy where he is and then she freaks out. But these are kids. So many anime in particular just forget that fact, whether or not it's what's his name, Deku, just forgetting the fact that Bakugo bullied the shit out of him for years, for most of his fucking life, and they're just kind of cool now. If you watch the anime, they're just kind of cool. Nah, man, I'm never fucking forgiving Bakugo if I was Deku. Okay, like all the shit that Subaru goes through in fucking in ReZero. Like, you can't just. They just be like, the only time you see them, like, their kids really being focused on is when they're doing some ridiculous shit. And I'm like, I can't believe you're only 13 years old and you're able to beat a world-class swordsman. It's like sometimes they use the different parts of a child character, but they don't use them well enough. And Mushoku Tensei does that, especially with Sara and Rudeus' relationship.
Everything she saw in the moment she treated as fact. To her, Rudy had spent the night with Soldat, sleeping with women that wasn't her, drinking the same alcohol he refused to drink with Counter Arrow, then recounting just how revolting Sara's body was to him. That was the story Sara came up with, and it was the story she would stick with until convinced otherwise. It wasn't until some time later...
They're whole-ass adults who do the exact same thing Sara does, okay? They're just whole-ass adults, whether it's adults that you meet every day or... like the law, or there are countless stories where they just see something and they believe it's fact until even after they're proven otherwise, whether or not it's through evidence or actual fact, whatever. I don't know, like you get what I'm trying to say here.
That Suzanne would go ahead and share her own impressions of the situation. To her, something was very clearly off about Rudy. She wasn't sure what it was, but the boy she saw back there definitely wasn't the Rudeus that she knew. So, knowing the dangers of coming to assumptions too quickly, Suzanne spoke from experience when she suggested it may just be a misunderstanding. Of course, Sara was convinced Rudy had just been lying the past 6 months, but after Timothy suggested it was a misunderstanding too, Sara finally resolved herself to determining the truth. She would return to town, question Rudy, then apologize if she did in fact jump to conclusions. When she returned and found he'd left, the only person she could talk to instead was Elise. A conversation that started out a bit hostile, but not from the person that you would expect. Since Elise knew the full context of the situation, she had recounted Rudy's story all while placing the entire blame on Sara. It was important she understand exactly the type of corner she had backed Rudy into. So, once all was said and done, Elise had left Sara with something to think about. If she wasn't even able to realize how much she'd hurt him, then she definitely wasn't ready to be his partner.
Those are fucking tough ass words. Like I said in my episode 3 review, okay? Sure, Soldat was broing out with Sara with Rudy at the time, taking him to a brothel, they got drunk, whatever. But he also took him to a place where his ED wouldn't be judged, where these ladies have seen it. You know, they're professionals. They've seen this happen before. And he's not judged. They're able to talk about it in a way that even us here on Earth can't talk about it. you know, and they're able to figure out if they can do something about it, you know. And Rudy, for as long as he's lived, if you add up both of his lives, he's so inexperienced mentally, you know. Most of his life he spent shut in his room. So I can't get mad at Sara because she did something that is a natural reaction, right? There's a natural reaction based on what she was given. That's why, thank God, Timothy and Suzanne were there to give her, like, hey, at least try to hear Rudeus out, you know? At least try to hear Rudeus out. But, like AniNews said, she comes back to town and he's gone. And we know that Rudy left with Soldat's party. They left, like, that day. So, like, that morning. So, it's just one of those things where, like, you just can't. It's too late, you know, it's too late. There's nothing you can do. He's gone. And remember, this isn't like they can teleport everywhere. Like, these things take years. Like you see in the newest episode where Rudy said if he left that time when he found out right where his mom was millennialized, it would take him a year to get there by foot. Even if obviously he's going to hop in some carriages or whatever, it would take him a year. Then, you know, he has to stop and do some jobs to make sure he has enough money to travel. Lord knows what else him and Millennialize would encounter on their way to the labyrinth city where his mom is and meet up with his dad. So, like I said, Mushoku Tensei does nothing without a reason. And fuck, man. I know I've said it so many times, but maybe the right person for Sara to talk to was also Elise, because, you know, Elise gave it to her straight. Like, this is what happened. Like, if you want to truly be with them, if you want to truly be with your partner, maybe somebody who's married will understand this. Like, when you just, when you've been with someone for so long, you really get to know them. You know when when they're down, you know when they're up, you know all these things about them. But it's also like, in order to get to where that part is, you know, when you've been married for years or however it is, when even to get to the point that you want to be married, you have, I guess, in most circumstances, you accepted that I am prepared, to be with this person through anything and everything. And the only reason I am prepared to do that is because I've already done it in the times that we dated, through the times that we got engaged, to us getting married now, you know. And that's why these words that you see on the screen here are so important, in my opinion. Like, Sara's natural reaction to the situation really hurt Rudy. And obviously it's a lot to ask of a 16-year-old girl, man. Like I said, my number one rule in life, man, kids are absolute assholes, man. It's like, for the first time, they know where the line is, but they just flagrantly cross in terms of socially or whatever, and they don't realize how much they can hurt someone else. And this stuff sticks with people, and especially when you're a kid and you're hurting another kid, that stuff can stick with people for years, man. Years. Like, I still have that with my Bakugo video where people were like, I was bullied in high school like 20 years ago, and that shit still sticks with me. And that's important. That's important to know. And that's why when Elise sets Sara straight, and she's like, look, man, like, you really hurt him, and if you truly loved him, you wouldn't hurt him that way, which is unfair to Sara, because Sara is not emotionally mature enough. Even though she is definitely more mature than Eris, in my opinion, she's still not emotionally mature for what Rudy needed at the time.
It was a statement that weighed heavy on her even after. Reason being that, in addition to the pain Rudy had caused her earlier, she now had to bear the weight of the pain that she caused him. They were feelings of remorse and regret that would haunt her the entire night. Suzanne did suggest that they should go after him, but Sara wasn't so brave as to be able to confront him like that.
That's crazy.
She was afraid that he wouldn't listen.
He definitely
scared he would
That's
push her away after what she'd done to him.
The craziest part is that Rudy would have listened. Rudy wouldn't have pushed her away. They would have just talked. And maybe that means that Sara does come out, and maybe Sara still gets scared and doesn't confess her feelings, and then she, Suzanne, and the rest of Counter would just go back to their town that they're staying at. Or maybe Rudy says, yeah, let's try it. And then Sara becomes his girl. And then maybe Sarah's the one that helps cure Rudy of ED. Because I think Sara would have stopped at nothing to cure his affliction. Oh, boy. the possibilities with Sara. That's what always gets me, is the possibilities of how Sara could have fit into the larger narrative of Mushoku Tensei if the author decided to go this way instead of the way he actually went. You know what I mean?
So, after a long night sobbing and coming to terms with everything that had happened, Sara simply accepted Rudy's silent departure as a sign of rejection. She knew now that the brief love they shared was over. If there did ever come a time where the two could meet again, though, Sara felt that she would like to apologize. A true and sincere one that would properly convey her feelings this time. But yeah, that's the story of Sara. Another tragic tale of misunderstanding. I'll talk more about it in the cut content for episode 3, but the way her relationship ended has so many fascinating parallels with the way that Rudy's ended. Like, Rudy saved her because he didn't want anyone to feel abandoned the same way Eris abandoned him, yet in the end he just ended up doing exactly that anyway. It's like a vicious cycle in which misunderstanding lies at the center of it. In any case, let me know what you thought about Sara in the comments. I'd love to see how you all perceived her story. Also, if you want more Mushoku Tensei content like this, then be sure to like and subscribe since I upload them every week. I also stream discussions every Sunday on Twitch. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!
That's exactly how you use misunderstandings, man. Like... Sara, like I said, one of the more tragic, maybe the most tragic character in Mushoku Tensei. If you could put her up there if you did a tier list, so. Nah, the most tragic character, I know who it is, but I don't want to say it right now. Anyway, guys, that was my reaction to the tragic tale of Sara, the girl that saved Rudeus, by AniNews. And like I said, it was very important that I wanted to have her story told. Because I thought episode 4 would do it, but episode 4 did not of the second season. So boom, there you go. So hopefully that answers a few questions about Sara, and hopefully you understand why she acted the way she acted, and especially in episode 3. But anyway, guys, that was my reaction. Thank you for listening or watching, however you consume this, and I will see you guys next week when I dive into the next episode of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation, which is episode 5, the Roanoa Magic Academy.